David, before I hit the record button, I was just mentioning how you like to talk a lot.
Yeah.
And so do you have anything just fun to start out with
No, man,
today?
I'm happy to be here, proud to serve.
Mhm.
I will say I really had to check my attitude. I'm excited about this conversation, Trey, and I appreciate you. You didn't know this. You unwittingly helped me get out of a little bit of funk, but I have had sick children in my house for 7 straight days.
Ooh.
The whole gamut of throwing up and all that fun stuff. And this morning I woke up, I was doing my quiet time. I'm like, Lord, I'm in a funk because it messes up your day, messes up your productivity. And then it kind of hit me. I was like, but I'm not laying in bed sick also. And so I started to check myself of like, how much compassion do I have for these sick children who didn't choose this? And I'm like that jerk that's like, really, you're sick again, and how it impacts my day, and it's an inconvenience to me, and I'm just like, that's pretty selfish. And I happen to be reading Matthew. I'm sorry, it was Mark, I believe it's chapter 12, and in Mark chapter 12, it talks about the two greatest commandments, and then the second being, love your neighbor as yourself. Sometimes your kids are your neighbor, and I was not loving them as myself. I was being very selfish.
Convicting,
It was
yes.
convicting. It always is. So,
Did you last time we were talking about your dog and how he was wearing a cone around his head.
yeah.
Did you try to do the cone on the children's
Yeah,
on your
yeah,
child's
it's
head?
effective. It's effective.
Effective?
It can projectile the vomit. Can You can direct it with a cone, and also yeah, it's a great form of punishment.
That's
Yeah,
good. That's good.
perfect. Yeah,
Well,
Trey,
Trey,
you didn't know what you got yourself into
yeah.
today. You agreed to this podcast, and you're like, wow, I immediately regret that decision.
No, this is great. Well, David, just for your essay, Trey's from Texas. We've had a lot of Texans on our podcast, Trey, because of just the connections and the referrals for podcast guests. So, um, Trey, thank you for having us or coming on our show, and we're excited about the conversation, man. Like, if you could just give a little bit of background about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. But blessing to be here, and it have been great getting to kind of meet you, Stu, and then David, now you. So excited for the conversation. My background is pretty simple. I was an entrepreneur from college till now, and have just kind of created a career of finding things that were interesting to me, learning how to do them, and then going and doing them. Some people call themselves serial entrepreneur. I think I'm more of a serial starter. And so I have built and or started 25 to 30 companies, and have gotten the opportunity just to play different roles in supporting friends and building companies, having my own ideas. And so I really enjoyed getting to do that, both on the technology and media side, getting to kind of help teach and help entrepreneurs as they grow. And then, most importantly, just really, really appreciate my faith and my family at home, who, part of being an entrepreneur is really just the unbelievable blessing of being able to go to a soccer game at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Now I may be up till 3 o'clock in the morning working, but you get to pick your own schedule, which is really great. So I have just learned a lot in that experience of being an entrepreneur. I believe entrepreneurs are a little different. We're kind of crazy. And so with that, we just try things that other people don't do. So, that's kind of been my career, both in the for-profit, nonprofit space, is just figuring out how I can use my gifts and talents to support and help people build things.
Yeah, you said a couple things there that resonated, and one of the things that I think you talk a lot about is not only the mindset around entrepreneurship, but the level of self-awareness required, and just from context from listening to some of your other interviews, you said I've started. I'm a serial starter, and I think you mentioned you love starting, but then the going through with the day to day, it's kind of like blah, right? And I think there's a level of self-awareness, though, because Stu and I think are similar. We love the starting, and then we start to get in the grind, and we're like, okay, what's the next thing? And there's
Mhm.
if you're not aware of those things, or even aware of your bent towards entrepreneurship, uh, I think there's the high failure rate is because we just don't know how we're built and where you need to inject other people or things to really make something go. And so if you don't mind, just talk a little bit about the mindset of entrepreneurship and really the idea around. I think the idea is super appealing because
Right.
everybody likes half of what you said. They like the 3 o'clock soccer game. They don't like the 3 o'clock in the morning, requirements, right? And so I think there's just
Mhm.
this level of there's a misunderstanding around, and almost a just this over sexification of entrepreneurship that really a lot of us realize it doesn't really exist that way.
Right. That's very true. I mean, it's a great point. I think for me, a lot of times I tell people, if you think you want to be a CEO or you think you want to be an entrepreneur, you probably have never done it before. And I think that's just the reality of what comes with it, right? There is that great side of I'm my own boss, I'm in charge, the buck stops with me. On the other side, I'm the boss, I'm in charge, and the buck stops with me, right? And if you know that dichotomy, then you definitely have been an entrepreneur. I think, for me, it's always been about trying to find ways that I can play key roles and help grow. But it's also that constant like teetering between absurd optimism and confidence and arrogance. And I think in my experience, the first time entrepreneur tends to be very heavily weighted on the arrogant side because you don't know what you don't know. As you've done this more and more, as you've built more things and you've learned more things, you begin to realize how important it is to understand your limitations, to build a good team of people around you. I often tell people that if you are the best at more than one thing in your company, then you hired poorly. But if you're the best at nothing in your company, you've hired brilliantly. And what a great entrepreneur does is he or she recognizes um, that there are lots and lots of people that can build a company better than you can. And so, I had a friend one time built an airline, and I said, "What are you doing today?" He said, "I'm spending all day long going to find somebody smarter and better than me to run my company." So it's really, I tell entrepreneurs too, it's not really about who who runs the company, it's about who owns the company. If you run a basketball team, you have the opportunity to bring LeBron James onto your team, and he's going to take your position. Would you not easily and readily give that up? And so I'm constantly looking for the right people to bring into the team and put them into a place where they can be successful. In the same sense, as you mentioned, the serial starter side, I'm also looking at when's it time for me to step out of the way. And there's times when, I may stay longer than other times. I really do enjoy that early side of it, but the true measure of how good of an entrepreneur you are is how good the company does after you're gone. And if you have that arrogant side where you think, man, this company shouldn't exist without me, this company can't win without me, you're limiting the opportunity. And so, one of my favorite parts of building a company is when I leave and I see that company continue to grow or even excel greater than where I had that. That means that you're really doing a good job building that business and getting it going. And so, I think that piece is super important as you think about building a team and think about building an entrepreneurial venture. Um, but on the other side, uh, it takes a special, unique type of person, not a better person, not a more special than somebody that's going to do something different. But if you aren't built like that, it's probably one of the most miserable things you could ever do as well.
You downplayed a little bit kind of all the stuff that you've done. You like, I just started and, grew like 25 or so companies and done a bunch of other stuff. I mean, you're teaching college courses at SMU. You're part of Techstars where you're doing, early stage seed capital for new startups and just like a ton of stuff, right? And so, as you've seen and helped other businesses grow and you're investing early stage startup capital, like what are you looking for? Like what are you seeing and identifying? Now that you've seen so many different companies, you've been a part of companies, you've you've been a part of pitches and like how are you identifying either like the individual, the founder, like how do you know that yeah, this one's going to be good? Like yeah, I like this guy. Like what are you looking for? Like what type of characteristics are you looking in a founder and an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I always tell people I think that building a business is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple, right? You gotta build a product or service, You have to sell the product or service, and you have to service the customer. If you do that, you succeed. And so for me, I'm always looking first and foremost at the person, at the founder, at the founding team, and do I believe that he or her is able to do that? Do I believe that they have integrity, that they're going to do the things that they said they're going to do? Do I believe that they're coachable, right? So one of the things I've learned in building 25 plus companies is that if anybody wants to give me advice, I'm willing to listen. That doesn't mean I take it all the time, but it means I want to listen, because what happens if I'm missing something? What happens if there's an element of something that I didn't know that I could learn, that I could grow from? And one of the things that's always been very clear to me is it's much easier to give an entrepreneur advice and counsel on how to build his or her own company than it is to look at your own company and grow it. There's often times where I actually do an exercise where I get up out of my seat, I walk around the table, I sit on the other side, and I say, all right, what would you tell yourself if you were in the investor chair? What would you tell yourself if you were in the advisor chair? And so I think those pieces are really important, but there's nothing more important than the team, especially at an early stage, because you can invest as an investor in a company that has an amazing team, an incredible market opportunity, a stellar product, and there are still 4,000 things that can go wrong to make the company not succeed. And so, at the very core of that, it's got to be the right person or the right team, because inevitably things are going to change. The company's going to pivot. Market conditions may, modify. You may have a global pandemic that changes the way you look at your business. And so, how are you figuring out whether that person or that team can and will adapt as they grow? Because one of the things that is true is that things will change. And if you are not personally convicted and you don't have strong purpose behind what you're building or how you're building it, then you're probably not going to stick with it. And so that is at the very core, the very initial thing I'm looking for is, how is that founder, and will that founder make it? And then I get into things like market opportunity. Is there an opportunity to create outsized returns? Is there the ability to grow and realize a large portion, or a big enough portion of the market? And then we get to the product, and we get to some of those other key elements. But if that initial piece around the team isn't super strong and super coachable, then it's just not worth it. Because if you can't add value by coaching, then they're not going to succeed. And it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your money.
I read an article that you wrote, and something along the lines of you saying that every entrepreneur has to be a little bit crazy. Like, what do you mean by that?
So I think the three main characteristics of an entrepreneur that I love is, one is their courage, right? It takes an obscene amount of courage to build something and take it and present it to the world and say, here's my heart, here's my soul, here's my baby, if you will. You may or may not like it. You may reject it. And so that first step is super important. The second step is perseverance. I think that thing that makes entrepreneurs succeed more than anything else is not because they're better or they're stronger or they're smarter, but rather they're just willing to persevere. They're willing to stick with something and not give up. But on top of that, considering, you know, 9 out of 10 companies fail, considering that it is a horrible probability if you're going to go out and build a company, and that most of them fail, you have to be a little bit crazy to have the courage and the perseverance to stick with something like that. And so that's a little bit of the crazy part that exists, because if we were really, really honest and we were really, really clear, and we looked at any opportunity and said, should we do this or should we not do this? The answer is you shouldn't. I had an entrepreneur come into my office a couple of years ago, and she said, hey, I just raised $1.4 million. And I was like, huh, that's weird. She's like, what do you mean that's weird? And I was like, well, it wasn't supposed to work. And she's like, well, you didn't believe in me? I said, no, that's not what I said. What I said was, your idea wasn't supposed to work. It has nothing to do with you, it has nothing to do with the idea. It has everything to do with percentages. And the fact that you bucked the system, that you were able to raise that initial money to go build out your business plan. We still don't know if it's going to work, but we've got enough money now to kind of prove that. That's incredible. And I never want entrepreneurs to not recognize the importance of those small inflection points, especially at the beginning, because so much about building a business is like a roller coaster and so much goes wrong. But the reality is, you don't have to have more good things happen than bad things happen. You just have to have enough good things happen to continue to help the business grow and for the business to succeed. And so it's much like playing golf. Like, you go out and you play 18 holes of golf. Most of us shoot 100 or more, but golly, we almost got a par on hole three. And gosh,
That
I
one
if I
shot,
just
the
if I
one
just
shot
wouldn't have
keeps you coming
missed.
back.
Right. If I just wouldn't have missed it, that would have been a hole in one. And
Yeah.
we keep coming back. And so that's the craziness that I talk about when I think about entrepreneurship, is that it just, you have to, it takes somebody who thinks a little bit differently, or maybe doesn't have all the screws completely tied in, to actually believe that they can go out and build something that will change a market, that will change the world, or even create a sustainable business.
Yeah, and I want to go back just briefly. You're talking about just the characteristics of a CEO and what you're looking for. I'm sorry, entrepreneur. I'm curious. How do you do that? Is there a practical way? And I think it'd be beneficial for our audience, even from a self-awareness perspective, to be able to say, okay, this is what somebody like Trey is looking for. But is there a quantifiable way that you do that? Like, I know you said be coachable and these things, but like, how do you know? Like, what is there something specific that you're like that you can test it? Like, oh, that resonates, or dude, not for you.
Yeah. So typically, in my experience, uncoachable people are really obvious. They stand out. And it's much harder to just tell how coachable somebody is than whether they're coachable or not. Non-coachable people just don't really take your advice. You ask them a question and they push back. You give some feedback and they sort of dismiss it. Or what happens a lot is, what I really want is, I really want the money. Like, if you could just give me the money, then I'm going to go handle this and we'll get it done. It's much more clear on that side than it is on the other side. But a lot of it comes from the way people answer questions. Especially when you say, well, when I was at Techstars, it was like, why are you applying for this accelerator program? Well, I need money. That's not a good answer. Hey, what I really need is, I need to learn. There's things that I don't understand. There's areas that I need to grow. I know that Techstars has this incredible network of mentors and advisors and people that could help me not make mistakes. That it's almost like how you can sense humility in somebody. Like, humility is just, at least for me, maybe because I struggle so much with it personally. When I sense humility in a person, it is over, I have an overabundance of how obvious it is, and I can sense that in their nature. Now, I want you to be humble. I also want you to be really, really bullish on your idea, and I want you to run 100 miles an hour. I just want you to run 100 miles an hour, and if you run into a wall, turn around and go, oh, wrong wall. Let's go the other way. Let's go the other way. Let's go the other way. And so it's a mixture of that. I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to learn, combined with, but I'm going to go as hard as I can. I'm going to push as fast as I can. I'm going to make mistakes at 100 miles an hour, and I'm not going to make the same mistakes again. I tell a lot of founders, one of the things I used to do when I would run and operate companies is, every quarter I would send out to my board the board presentation. Now, unfortunately, most board members don't read that really well ahead of time, but I would put into the board presentation all the great things that were going on with the company, because I realized that spending my time with the board telling them how great we were doing wasn't helping me. Right. It sure made them feel better about either the investment or better about our company. It didn't help me. What I really wanted to do was, I wanted them to understand that we were learning, we were growing, and we were understanding our mistakes. So I would say, here are the three mistakes we made in the last quarter that we're not going to make again. Because what they needed to understand was not, are we going to make mistakes and should we be surprised when a mistake happens? We're going to make mistakes all the time. we're just going to recognize them. We're going to rectify them, and we're going to move forward. And so those types of things, recognizing that you have a board, an advisory board for a reason, you brought them around to add value and to help you grow and to help make right decisions. What you don't need from a board is somebody telling you all day long how great they think you are. And as an entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to do that. Now, if you're talking about building a company or coming into a company that already exists, it's a little bit different, because my experience has been I'm not as much worried about somebody firing me from a company I started because I don't think we can convince anybody else to take that job. So there's a little bit more opportunity to be transparent and authentic about the mistakes you're making. But gosh, what if I could really leverage all these people around me to teach me how to get better and better and better? Even if you weren't there, I had one of my companies, we had the chairman of Wells Fargo, the then chairman of Wells Fargo was on our board. What I could tell you is that he knew absolutely nothing about the technology we were building. But when he would talk, I would just write down everything. I would write it all down and I'd go back later and I'd be like, he's something he's telling me is going to be super valuable to me. Um, Rather than what most entrepreneurs would do, which is, you don't understand my technology, I can't learn anything from you. It was, oh my gosh, this is going to be a wealth of information and knowledge that I can take away. What can I learn from that? And my belief is that you can learn something from every person that you talk to, every person that you interact with. And it's those things that help the company get better, that constantly help you refine your focus to be more efficient, more effective, to be a better company as you continue to grow. So those are some of the things that I look at, some of the sort of things that I think about, as I'm building and growing a business, to make sure that confidence and that arrogance doesn't conflict, because if it does, you're setting yourself up for failure.
There's this kind of joke in the entrepreneur world that says that I gave up a 40-hour W-2 job to go and build an 80-hour a week business. And I find myself in that a lot of just
Mm.
like nonstop mind on the business and not being able to like be present and focused. And, we talked about like how awesome it is to be able to like manage your own schedule and go to the 3 o'clock soccer game. But as a family man yourself, like how does an entrepreneur balance that? How does an entrepreneur shut down the mind, put, stop gaps in place where you can be present with the family?
So I think there's several answers to this question. I've dealt with it several different ways. The first answer is to try to put in your own guardrails. That doesn't really work for me. Like I'm going to walk
It's
into a
hard.
room, and I could walk out of that room 13 hours later, 16 hours later, and have no idea what's transpired. And so part of it is I used to structure it based upon the stage of life I was in. So before I was married, I'd work till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Then I'd go home and work for a couple more hours, right? Start at 6. Then I got married, and then I would come home at about 6. And then I'd, spend time with my wife. And then when she went to bed, I'd work. And then when I had a kid, I got home at 5. And then I had 2 kids, and I had 3 kids. And then it was, okay, we've got games. And so what ended up happening was I was pushing the majority of my work into the later hours, so that I could try to be present for my family. That doesn't work either. So what I had to kind of eventually learn was, you know what, in the end, I need to be as efficient as I can with my time, and I need to set up guardrails around my time so that I'm disciplined to that. Now, there's always things that are going to happen that you and your, partner have to be able to be prepared with. One time I woke up in the middle of the night because it was raining in my office. How does that happen? I don't know, but I had an option. I could either call my staff and have them go down and clean it up, or I could go down and clean it up. But my wife had to realize at 2 in the morning I had to get up out of bed. That's things you can't control. But there are things that you can control around. Hey, I'm gonna shut my laptop at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, and I'm not gonna get up and do this. I'm not gonna miss certain events here or there unless it's something that's uncontrollable. The last thing I would say, and my wife is really good about this, is she will tell me when I'm in the wrong place, right? She has such an understanding of when our family is feeling like I'm not present. There were years of my marriage where she would say, "You were there, but you weren't there." Like you were, and it's because I was building 6 companies at one time. Like you can't do that, right? That's not possible to do that well. And so the balance is really more, how do you manage it in your head? Because in our heads, we're always thinking about that thing. It's just always there. And the hard part is that you're taking something that in many cases God has gifted us to be able to build and grow things, and we get so much excitement from that. And I believe that when you operate in those skill sets, you're actually being worshipful because you're glorifying the Lord through your work. Now that quickly can become an idol if you do it too much or you do it too hard. So we're constantly thinking about that, and frankly, it really fills us in a way that a relationship with your spouse or with your kids doesn't fill you. It's a different thing. It's not better, it's not more important. So for me, having my wife who can come in and say, hey, look, I feel like you've been out on entrepreneur things 3 times in the last 2 weeks. That's too much. Or, hey, you haven't been home. Did you realize you're coming home at 7 o'clock at night rather than five, which we had talked about? All of those little things become valuable. So having the right spouse or partner is hugely important, because if you ask my wife, she would say, I knew when I got married that I was marrying this. I didn't know what it would be like to live with this for forever, but I kind of knew what I was getting into. And so that piece there is really important. And I've also heard people, really successful entrepreneurs saying that you can't really be successful, truly successful, if you are not 100% committed to your business. And my response to that is, okay, well then I just won't be 100% successful. Like I'm okay. That's my choice. And so that balance
And
is,
what is
some people,
success? You know?
right. And that's a whole nother thing. That's what I've been spending a lot of time with students talking about is, what do you think success is and why do you think that's success?
Yeah.
We believe or have been taught success is about numbers, dollars in the bank. But what is that true? Why is it true? Well, it doesn't have to be true if it's not how you feel. So let's redefine success and let's chart a path that allows us to be successful. Despite some people, success may be, I want to get home at 5:30 every day and I want to spend every moment that I'm not working with my family. So I'm not going to work in the weekends. I'm not going to work at night. That's an amazing success story, right? That's incredible. Other people would say, I want to make X amount of dollars. Well, here's the one thing I know about people that want to make X amount of dollars. That number never doesn't move, right? Gosh, if I could just have $1 million. Well, now I want $10 million. Well, I got 10. If I could just get 100, and it goes and goes and goes, and we create unrealistic places for joy to exist because it just doesn't exist there. And so that balance piece is important to sanity, health, joy, happiness, contentment, fulfillment. So if you change that process, I learned at an early age when I built one of my companies that was really, just despite me really successful, that I couldn't control whether my company succeeded or didn't succeed. All I could control is my contribution to the process. And so what I focused on is every day contributing to the process. And if I did that and I could find joy in that, then if it succeeded and did really well, that was awesome. And if it didn't, I didn't feel extremely upset about that either. And I think that is a part of the balance piece that you have to build into your life. But also recognize that for me, I can't speak for all entrepreneurs, but for a lot of entrepreneurs, our biggest temptation will always be to over-index on the building, on the owning, on the managing, on the on the entrepreneurial side. And we've got to be willing to hear from the people in our lives that we love that say that, you need to slow down. That's too much. I need to see you more. And then they, on the other side, have to be willing to give us grace to say, just because it feels like this is more important to you, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way you feel. It's just a weird piece inside of you that we don't understand and is a little bit crazy. And so we'll give you grace in that, despite um, despite the fact that, you know, you're built a different way.
Despite the fact you're so weird. We're just a weird brand of people. You hit on a couple things that I think are fascinating, and you have a unique opportunity, not only through experiencing success in starting businesses and exiting and how you grow those, but to be in front of individuals to teach them now. And I'm just curious, what are some of the biggest blind spots, common blind spots that you're seeing and how do you get in front of that, as you're teaching these young entrepreneurs, I'm assuming young, you're teaching these young entrepreneurs before they even get into it, some of the biggest traps, and you mentioned a couple of them, right? I want to make X amount of money. I have also never met that individual that was like, yep, X, it's X for a reason because X is, it's continuously changing. But
Right.
how are you helping them identify and to early stage be able to create that why the what success looks like? How do you do that? And how can we look at these things as we go into a business and just be more judicious and good stewards of all the giftings, right? Because I agree with you 100%. When I feel most alive when I'm living in my gifts that God gave me. And sometimes, and I think it's okay to say, I feel very alive and most alive when I'm living in my dad and my husband gifts as well. But there's another piece that needs to be fed, and I believe that God gifted us uniquely in those areas. How are you really helping the students to get a grasp on that before they jump in both feet and get to the place where, Stu and I have seen a lot of entrepreneurs that they reach a certain age and like, oh man, like I missed everything. And now they're quote unquote successful. And we talked to a guy that was like, okay, now I'm available. Well, their kid is a grown adult now and they don't have time. They're on their own journey,
Right.
right? So how can we proactively avoid that?
So that's a great question and a hard one. I think it's uh, properly planning out what you can control and you cannot can control. And so, the students I teach different things. I teach this concept of the entrepreneurial mindset because the first day of class I ask my students how many of you want to be entrepreneurs, and 95% of them raise their hand. The last day of class I say how many of you want to be entrepreneurs, and 5% raise their hands. And I say, well, the good thing is this isn't a class for entrepreneurs, so you didn't waste your semester. This is a class that teaches the entrepreneurial mindset that should benefit you regardless of whether you're a barista at Starbucks, middle management, or Steve Jobs building the most innovative company in history. These elements of creativity, of problem solving, of looking at failure in a different way, understanding that there's winning and there's learning. It's not about, and if you get to a place, and I tell this to founders all the time, if the worst thing that can happen to you, the worst thing is that your idea doesn't work and you can get okay with that, you have nothing to lose, right? Most entrepreneurs, if you strip away, all of those different elements of money and success and power, like if you just ask them what what success look like to you, they're usually just like, I just want to build my vision. I just want to accomplish this thing I've got in my head, right? With that comes a lot of these other places, but what you have to begin to do is you have to begin to set them up with the proper expectations, right? Number one is this most likely isn't going to work. Number two, that's okay. Number three, you may have to do this 2, 3, or 4 times before you figure out something that does work. But most importantly, all you can do is control your contribution to the process. So focus on that. Don't focus on the outcome. And then you can build yourselves into a place where it is. And most entrepreneurs, even the Mark Cubans of the world, if they were super honest, they would say, look, I got lucky. Like, yeah, I worked really hard. I was in the right spaces. I saw these things happen. But for the first time, the first big win, I just was lucky. And then they start to get good, right? They start to have a little bit more money and they can start to build things and they can be better and more strategic at what they're doing. But each person has to define what for them is important and what success looks like. I don't think an entrepreneur that builds a $50 billion business is better than an entrepreneur that builds a $30,000 a year business. And so enabling and empowering people to be confident and comfortable in who they are and what they want to build and what they want to do is super important. And then on top of that, constantly bringing that back to surround yourself with the right people, right? One of the things that I tell people all the time is the one thing an entrepreneur needs more than anything else is the one thing that he or she does not have, and that's experience. And you can get experience one of two ways. I mean, unfortunately, you can't go into a 7-Eleven and buy 5 years of experience, but you can either learn it, um, which takes time and money and a lot of mistakes, or you can surround yourself with people, and we're going to make plenty of mistakes either, or you can surround yourself with people that are experts in the area, that are experts in the space. And so I encourage them, go find people that have been there and done that. Find people that can help you not make some of the mistakes that you're going to make already. That oftentimes, if we don't find those people, we won't have enough time or money to get to a place where we can even launch a company. And so those pieces or elements, I can't define for somebody what success is. Is success for somebody is really how much money that they have in the bank. You know, that's for them. And that's something that they have to do. And maybe they hit that or not. My argument is that as an entrepreneur that has true purpose, is that you can be successful without failing to hit a number, without failing to accomplish a certain level. And when you live in a world that's so short, right? We're not here for very long. How horrible would it be to set yourself up into position to where you don't accomplish something, or you do accomplish and you realize how empty it is? The journey is what the exciting part of it is. The journey of building a company, the way that you can affect the lives of people around you, the way you can help um, build and equip people to be. My favorite thing about running companies is helping people exceed their expectations. Not my expectations, but their expectations for themselves. I find that to be an unbelievable, a blessing, opportunity, and responsibility. And so when I look at building these companies and doing these entrepreneurial things, so many other things to me are important than rather just the outcome, which I can't really control completely in myself anyway.
God made the gift of really being good at Excel spreadsheets for David. David loves an Excel spreadsheet.
Duh.
Yeah, he loves
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I crush Excel. I'm more akin to like the files are in the computer kind of guys,
Yeah,
right?
there you go. There you go.
Uh, Trey, you've spoken before. I've heard you talk a lot about kind of like this entrepreneur ecosystem,
Hmm.
kind of built around community, and you've been looking at it at like a city level, right? Of like how cities come together and build an ecosystem to support each other in this entrepreneur venture. And I'm curious, like Dave and I were talking before the show, like how does a small men's group ecosystem support all the entrepreneurs within the community? And community has always been really an important piece for us. I'm curious kind of how you see that. How do you take a city and then bring it down to a 40-person men's group, a church group? Like how do you build a
Yeah,
ecosystem around entrepreneurs like that can like support each other and like grow that?
that's a great question. I mean, to me, it's sort of the same structure, right? When I explain how to build ecosystems inside of a city or region, it's all about finding key stakeholders. And key stakeholders are people in a men's group, it would be people with different skill sets and backgrounds, right? People with different relationships, people that are experts in different areas, people that could, have different life experiences, or that can come in. And then you bring those stakeholders and you get those stakeholders to agree upon the goal. Hey, we're going to all help each other, which a men's group's a little different than like a networking group. But networking groups are created to be like, hey, we're going to come together and like see how we can help each other grow their businesses, kind of thing. But it would be that. Men's group would be a little bit different, and you're not only concerned about the business, you're concerned about the person, and you're concerned about their relationships, you're concerned about their faith, their walk with Christ, and it creates a certain level of accountability. But some of my greatest relationships and ecosystems that exist are with other Christian entrepreneurs, because we know what is, and we've discussed what is our plumb line, what's our basis, and what should we be making decisions off of, and how should we be thinking about that. And in that case, we're able to support each other, encourage each other, hold each other accountable. All those elements begin to exist. And so as you look at a men's group, you say, okay, what are the different things that we want to build? How are we giving opportunities for each of those men to talk about, their needs, their ideas, their passions? How do we encourage them in the times where that they're going well? How do we help celebrate them when they not, much like iron sharpening iron, and where Scripture talks about this, celebrate with those who celebrate, mourn with those who mourn. Like, you just need to feel like you're not alone. And one of the things that I think we see a lot in entrepreneurship is that so often we feel like we're alone unless we have that ecosystem. And whether it's C12 or EO or YPO, all the different organizations that are out there, one of the biggest opportunities that exist in that is you've got somebody next to you who says, I've been through that. I know what that feels like. I can help you. Those sorts of things to make, because as a CEO of a fledgling or growing business, you can't go to your employees and say, we may not have money in 3 months. They don't do well, right? And they don't even do well with you going, I have no idea what we should be doing right now. Like, they want stability, they want a paycheck, they want to know that you're in charge, they want to be told what to do, which is great and okay. Again, it's not better or worse than the CEO, but being able to have people that you can share with, that you can confide in, that you can be authentic and transparent with, and that will listen and take feedback and continue to grow. I see that happen all the time in non-Christian groups and Christian groups alike. But there is a higher level of accountability in the faith-based space around what our responsibility is as leader, what the level of integrity needs to look like, how we're going to treat our employees, how we're going to treat the environment that we want to have. And that's an interesting piece, because where my opinion or my experience is the church can't has not historically done a great job of playing that role, whereas men's groups can, because the church doesn't understand entrepreneurship. Um, and again, it's not better or worse. It's just having organized church try to come in and help support entrepreneurs. They don't get that. We had one of the churches I went to one time brought all the business leaders together in a room and asked, hey, said, we're going to start a business ministry initiative, and we're going to have some, institute stuff, and we're going to take some classes. Who's interested in that? 85% of people raise their hands. It's awesome. I'd love to focus on, business as ministry. 15% of the people didn't. And the church said, oh, well, why aren't you interested in that? And he goes, I've got to put food on my table next month. And if I don't go work, then I'm not gonna have the food and I can't put it on my table. Like, I don't need to go to a business as mission class. My business is my mission. Like, it's just, and so it's just understanding, or really in the church's perspective, not understanding how to support those entrepreneurs, whereas uh, a men's group could do that in a way that the church isn't. So my argument, or my recommendation to the churches I've worked at, has always been equip the men's group to serve the entrepreneurs, and then be present, be there, right? Be there to encourage, to support, to fund, to listen, to pray for, but not to you know curriculamize it, or to try to take it like that, because it just doesn't work that way, or has not, at least to this point in my career.
Yeah, I love how you point out, and we often hear it. It's lonely at the top, and I think the recognizing that is great. So what are you gonna do about it? Right? Like, yes, it's lonely at the top is it sounds super smart, and you're acknowledging a truth that everybody knows. But what are you gonna do about it? And so I love how you highlight, become, especially as an entrepreneur, in really in any facet of our life, an area that you want to exceed, or that you want to excel, that you want to grow, and is challenging, is better done with a group, with a like-minded individuals,
Mhm.
like-minded in the sense of they're all there to grow, and you're all there to challenge each other. I think we're losing the ability to really critically think and challenge each other on some of our presuppositions and the way that we consider whether it's politics, faith, uh, working. I'm reading a book right now about food somebody gave me, and it's fascinating. The book, the author says, hey, most dietitians and where they're at is equivalent to where surgeons were at in the 1650s. And it's fascinating by their own admission, right? And so how do we grow in all these areas? How do you recognize, okay, like I am not great at business. How do I get myself in a group around it? Because I think we just suffer in silence and we suffer by ourselves. And then 9 out of 10 of us fail, and you wonder why, right? You're like, wow, man,
Right.
what could I have done different? What would you talk to? Who told you your baby was ugly and you listened? Because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, I think you said on another podcast, some people are gonna think your baby are cute. You just need to get around those people.
You need to
Um,
find those people, right?
you gotta find those
Yeah.
people.
It's so important to figure out like I always say that entrepreneurs don't have the luxury, the time, or the money to act like they know things they don't know. And so the entrepreneur is always the one standing there with his or her hand up, going, I don't know what that word means. Explain that to me. Like they realize, and this is, I don't know why we do this, but they realize that lack of experience or lack of knowledge is not a character flaw. Does not make you, how could you know something that you didn't know? If you laughed at me because I couldn't speak French fluently, like,
You can't speak
I,
French fluently.
see, there we go. There we go. So, I mean, the idea being like the greatest thing about not knowing something is that you can either learn it or get experience in it. And so we have the freedom as entrepreneurs to not have to know all the answers. And what I've seen is that as entrepreneurs lead in that approach, in that honesty, in that transparency, it other people come in swarms. Oh, you know what? We're running out of money. I did something wrong with my, I didn't set up my loan payments correctly, and I messed up, and we're in dire trouble, right? Basically, I failed, I messed up, I'm not sufficient, and our company's in trouble. And then three other guys go, "Oh my gosh, that's happened to me. Let me tell you what we did. Like, let me tell you what we learned. Let me tell you how." And so that piece there allows us to build that network and that support system that's super valuable, that is essential for growth. And then as we start to learn how to do that with each other, we can do it for others. And then it continues to grow and grow and grow. And then we'll have much better companies, and we'll have much better successes, and we'll have much better, teams and experiences and learnings. But that you've got to be willing to, much like a men's group already does. I mean, typically a great men's group is full of men that are willing to be honest, transparent, and authentic. And so it's no different. You're just doing it with your business. And that's where that support comes to help us grow and help us, succeed. But we need to encourage people, especially believers, to build businesses and to go out there and try new things because we are, um, God created us to be excellent in what we do. He created us to worship Him in the way that we do that. And if we're taking the gifts and talents He's given us while we're on earth and using those for His glory, then it's going to be excellent and it's going to be incredible. That doesn't mean we can't mess it up or things can't get in the way, but gosh, building that strong community and network to support somebody makes all the difference in the world. And then it's so wonderful to be able to rejoice and celebrate somebody who does have a win and a victory and an exit. Just like it's helpful to go to find somebody who has a something that doesn't work and tell them that's okay. It doesn't define who you are. It does not define your purpose or your significance. It's just a part of what you do. And reality is most of them fail. So if you have not built a company that failed yet, just wait because it'll happen.
Yeah.
And you got to learn from that and grow. So
Yeah.
it's an important
Amen.
part of the process.
Yeah, man. I watched a video recently of a CEO, Ford CEO. He came in, he was a new guy, and they had stoplight charts, and everything was green. It was always green. He's like, we're about to lose $15 billion and everything's green. But it was a culture thing, right? And really what ended up happening, he said the best day of his life was when he came into the meeting and there was finally a rainbow of colors because people realized they weren't red, the product line was red. There was an issue, and when they said, I'm red here, he said that the dynamic was fascinating is someone from this side of the room said, "Oh, I can help you with that. Like we have a solution to that. We have this." And I think that's the power of the group, right? I acknowledge I'm not red. This aspect of my life is red. This, and maybe I'm responsible for it for sure, but
Hmm.
I am not red inherently. And how do I
Right.
get to green? The ability to get to green is great. Dude, I love it, man. I'm a big believer that businesses are. I love Jesus. I love the church. Businesses touch so many people, and there's such an opportunity to really be excellent in our business. I think God calls us to be excellent. The idea
Hmm.
of, oh, that's a good song for a Christian song, that to me is a false. Like it should be excellent because it's Christian, because it's it's dedicated to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, right? And so the fact that you're pouring into people to bring success, whatever that looks like, but to bring glory to God and to extend influence and reach and impact, man, I love it, dude. And you're not going to recognize the full reach of that of your influence and your impact for the kingdom until heaven, but I promise you it's going to be huge because just the nature of what you're doing and the nature of business and how it touches so many people, man, it's an exciting prospect.
Well, thank you. It's a humbling thing to get to do, and I find so much joy in it, just getting to help people build stuff. So it's I'm glad that I've been given the opportunity to spend some of my time doing this.
Trey, we've just on this hour we've learned a ton, and I've learned a bunch more just listening to you in other spaces and reading all the articles and stuff that you're putting out in the world. How do we get our audience to find out more about you and follow you and learn more from you? What do we put in the show notes?
Thank you very much. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's a great place to connect. It's just Trey Bowles on LinkedIn, and then I'm sort of working on a couple of projects that are in stealth right now, and really trying to figure out kind of as I move out of my role as an investor with Techstars, how am I gonna continue to invest in ways that I can plug in and support entrepreneurs. I'll always do that in some way, shape, or form, but I also really like to build stuff, and so I probably will build some new things, and some of them will work, and some of them won't. But I'm always interested in figuring out how I can support people and help people grow what they're doing and connect people in ways that can help them. So LinkedIn's a great place to kind of connect with me because I'm there. Or one of my 32 different email addresses, which are much harder to keep a hold of.
Dude, I feel you. I'm at like seven, and a buddy of mine just kind of hired me to come on and help him out. He's like, "Do you want an email address?" And I was like, "Nope, sure
Got
don't.
enough.
Have enough of those."
0%. Yeah, in my mind, I only have one. So
Oh
one
yeah,
That's
email
good.
address. Yeah, it's at a time, and most of them get ignored. That's the problem. I'm
that's yeah.
terrible.
David
Spreadsheets and
has like seven.
emails, those are two of
Yeah,
my like really, really strong suits.
God did not gift David in tracking email.
No, not a gift.
Oh, Trey, this has been fun, man, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate your wisdom.
Thank
And
you.
guys and gals, hey, reach out to Trey. He's an amazing source of knowledge, all things entrepreneurship. Appreciate you, Trey.
Thanks so much for having
Thanks,
me.
Trey.